So when I did that first draft of that cartoonish scene in the dunes, I didn't go, oh my God, I'm a terrible writer. This is such an awful scene.
Yeah.
I'm gonna walk away from the whole thing. I thought, no, do you know what? This is part of the natural process.
Yeah.
It's getting it down initially, and then it's going back and layering it in and layering it in.
Hello, this is Louise Dean, founder of the Novelry, the world's best loved school for writers, with more 5-star reviews than any other and a whole bunch of published success stories. As an award-winning Booker-listed author, I founded the Novelry to help writers avoid the frustrations of writing solo for years by getting wise eyes on the most important element of writing right from the get-go. Story, story, story. And this is our podcast to give you everything you need for happy writing. This is the Novelry on Writing.
Hello, I'm Emylia Hall, the author of the Shell House Detectives mystery series, amongst other novels, and I'm also a writing coach at the Novelry.
And hello, I'm Urban Waite. I'm the author of 4 novels, 4 crime suspense novels, and I'm also a coach at the Novelry.
We're here today to talk juicy conflicts, aren't we, Urban, and to offer you 5 tips for writing juicy conflicts. Conflict is essential. That's got to be the first tip, right? It's essential in any form of novel. For what we do, crime, mystery, your novel's nothing without conflict. But I would argue all novels are nothing without conflict.
Agreed. These are the sort of juicy bits you need to add to the story to make people, to engage people, to get them to want to know what happens. To put your characters in conflict is kind of the heart of the story.
Yeah, because novels are fundamentally about change. And, we know as individuals that we never really get to change unless we're being tested by a situation. You hear that phrase, an experience is character building. Well, we're rarely talking about a positive experience there. It tends to be a negative experience that asks something that bit more of you. And I think when you're writing conflict in a story and you're trying to design how you can really test your characters, thinking about the harder that conflict can butt up against their deepest desires, the better.
Yeah, I mean, human beings are complicated things, and there's so many little parts that go into them that when you're sort of walking your characters through these larger stories where horrible stuff is happening to them, you test them. You see what they'll do. They make choices along the way. Sometimes those choices create more conflict. Sometimes it solves conflict, but usually it's like they hit a wall, they have to go another direction. They hit another wall, they have to go another direction. And that's really the story that you want to follow. And then you want them to change along the way.
Yeah, I think what you said about lots of small conflicts, you get past one, you hit another. I think that's a really important thing to bear in mind, isn't it? Because you'll often have a central conflict in a novel. So at the Novelry, we talk about, what's your reader reading to find out?
Yeah.
That's likely to be that central conflict. But equally, you're going to have lots of micro conflicts, let's say.
Yeah. I mean, it's like for most storylines, if you're writing a novel, screenplay, really any larger story, you're going to have your A, B, C, D, forever plot lines, and you're following all of them and you're sort of weaving them all together, braiding them together. And it gets complicated, but if you sort of recognize what you're doing, understand that it's necessary for the change and pushing the conflict, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's so central to the whole act of writing a novel, isn't it? I think if you can bear that in mind, then you're going to be standing in good stead to deliver something engaging, because it's about showing character, it's about propulsion, it's about reader engagement. In fact, I'm not sure I can think about any part of the writing process that conflict isn't deeply stitched into.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right now kind of laughing because I think about sometimes when you're reading a novel and you're sort of following along, you're empathizing with the character, and they're about to make a horrible, horrible decision. And you're screaming at them, your mind is screaming that, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And then they do it. And you're like, you just see it coming. But it's wonderful to watch,
Yeah.
to see them have to squirm or go down a road you probably wouldn't have taken. And that's all it's all feeding into the idea of conflict and sort of how this character, especially for crime, suspense, how they're going to survive, or not survive, because it's crime and conflict and suspense and death usually.
I think how you survive is central to the experience of reading, right? Because this leads us on to what I think is probably our second point, that conflict is character building.
Yeah.
I know that the reason that I read is because I'm fascinated by how other people live their lives. I think that's probably the reason that we all leave, to see behind the curtain, to see what it's like to walk in somebody else's shoes. And we're fascinated by how other people react to certain situations. Like, oh my God, what would I do if that happened to me?
Yeah.
So that the greater the conflict, then the bigger the ask, the more wrapped we are, I think, as readers, because we think, oh my God, if a gunman walked into this room now, what would I do? Would I be the person to hide behind the sofa?
Jump out this window.
You jump out the window. Maybe I'd talk him down. Maybe I'd be the hero. There's all those things. And I think the more you can put yourself in that person's shoes, then that's what reading is all about. It's key, isn't it? But I think what's so important is, say that scene with the gunman coming into the room, for that not to feel like melodrama, for not to feel insincere, inauthentic. We have to believe in the characters that are in that situation.
Yeah.
Because if it's plot with a capital P, and if it's conflict with a capital C, without character also being completely, fully realized, I think we just switch off as readers.
Basically, that's the idea of character building. Like, it's conflict all feeds into it. The choices made, what the character does, whether they jump out a window or talk them down or throw a tree at them, or I don't know what other things we have. We could take these cups and, who knows, we might survive, we might not. But it is all part of the story. And then sort of it all feeds into one thing, feeds into the larger plot, A, B, C, D, whatever,
Thinking about those, the main plot, the subplots, I think we have layers when it comes to conflicts as well, don't we? We have the internal and the external. And on the face of it, the external conflict might be what initially draws a reader in. I think as writers, it might be the thing that immediately makes us think, oh, I've got a novel on my hands here. I've got a story because I've got this amazing scene where a gunman comes into the room, or this car chase or whatever. But actually, I think those internal conflicts, so the smaller things, the things that are more emotionally driven, are what really can create that engagement between reader and story.
Yeah, novels are basically built in layers, or like the metaphor of like the paintbrush and brush strokes, as you sort of build up your novel and create your characters. And desire plays a huge thing, and what does the character want? It all factors in, and so you have to sort of like feed the novel, feed the conflict to get to where you want to go,
and make it feel like there's a real person at the center of this. I mean, thinking about our hero books at the Novelry, a fantastic one is Missing Presumed by the late great Susie Steiner. And I think one of the reasons that I love that novel, so we've got D.S. Manon Bradshaw, who's this fantastic detective. Like, she's unequivocally brilliant at her job, but away from work, she's a mess, right? She drinks too much. She's lonely as hell. So she goes out on this strings of terrible dates with people. She has a really fractious relationship with her sister. At work, she can be reckless. She can annoy her colleagues, but she does get the job done. But for me as a reader, what is so fascinating about that character, and therefore about the stories, are those internal conflicts that Manon experiences and overcomes to a degree through the course of the story. So yes, she cracks the case, but also she faces down those other struggles along the way, which are often more relatable because, going back to we're loving our gunman in the room, thinking about him, not that many people, thank God, have an experience like that. But actually loads of us have an experience where, maybe we're feeling undervalued in our work, or we're having a tense time with our partner, or we're a little bit scared of a fairly mundane seeming thing. And they're those very relatable points to stitch into a story, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that character in herself is very good, well drawn. Like the idiosyncrasies of the character really sort of help them become human in your mind, you know, instead of just a story on a page. And that creates empathy, creates a desire in the reader to see what happens, to want them to survive, want them to solve the case, want them to just get one good date, you know, that sort of thing. So
Yeah. Again, thinking about crime stories, crime novels, if a detective feels like a machine, then we just don't connect with the story in the same way. Maybe we're drawn in by the plot. You know, maybe we applaud the way the investigation comes together, but we're missing that really human connection. And I mean, it's my theory. It's probably not that novel of a theory, but everything in novel writing comes back to character. Like, regardless of what aspect of novel writing you're talking about, really, it's all about character. Yeah,
and how they respond to, you know, the various environments they're in. I mean, there's like character versus nature, character versus society, character versus character, character versus self, you know, so like you have like Old Man and the Sea, character versus nature, Handmaid's Tale, character versus society. There's, I mean, countless character versus character.
And countless characters to bring to the page. I think that's one of the fun things to think about when you're designing a novel and you're thinking, who can I put into this world that is either probably worse placed to handle this conflict, because that's more interesting, right? The further you have to travel emotionally to overcome something, that's more interesting for us as readers.
Yeah, I mean, you usually introduce the sort of larger problem, and then you kind of like define the world. And then you find that perfect character that's not quite perfect enough, you know, like they're not quite up to the job. And so that's the story. That's the process of them solving it, is like, how do they do it? And you just keep loading things on, which is fun sometimes.
Keep throwing those rocks.
Styly.
With courses, coaching and community, the Novelry is the world's top-rated writing course. You'll come up with the idea for a novel you can't wait to write, then you'll write a finished draft, and you'll edit your novel into a book that readers will love. A Big 5 publishing editor will review your novel. So, if you've got a book in you and you've never found the right time to write it, now there's a good place. Come on over to the Novelry. Beginners welcome. We'll show you how to start, coach your story into shape, and cheer you on to type the end.
I think our fourth point is that we're only going to care about conflict. We're only going to have any kind of response to it if we care about the characters involved. That's where all the emotional intensity comes from. So I think as a writer, you can cook up something that sounds fantastic in 2D, but when you bring it to the page, if you're not peopling that situation with fantastic characters, then you're only ever going to engage readers on one particular level. And, you know, we're wanting to hit it out of the park. We want to engage all the senses, right? I've got an example from my writing life where that really came in acutely. So in my mystery series, The Shell House Detectives, in the first book, I have this knife fight in the dunes. It's cozy crime, right? So I'm pushing the envelope a little bit with my knife fight. I wanted people to take it seriously. I wanted people to...
It's conflict.
It's conflict. I wanted to take my two characters seriously who are plunged into this situation. Yeah. I wanted the reader to feel the peril of the moment. And that... it really gave me pause for thought, actually, because I thought there's a good chance that this scene is going to come across as cartoonish or melodramatic if I don't really pay attention to my characters. And I feel like I did that in a couple of different ways. Eventually, it was not there in the first draft.
Did you feel like you had to layer in things as you sort of built it?
Yeah. So the first write of it probably was cartoonish and melodramatic because I was just slapping down the action. Yeah. And then I went back and I just looked at the first half of the novel, which I think, you know, you have to get readers on side and believing in characters pretty early on, I think. and then you can ratchet things up later in the novel and they'll go along with you. So yeah, I had to make sure that my characters were as well drawn as possible. So by the time we got to those more dramatic parts of the story, that actually the emotional response wasn't going to be lost on them.
Yeah.
I also found, I don't know if you have this when you're writing action, that slowing it down is actually really important to really step into the moment with the characters and try to convey what they're feeling, hopefully in a way that feels fresh and original. So the reader's like, oh, knife fight in the dunes. Yeah, I've seen that one before.
So what you were saying earlier is sort of a tool that I use, which is kind of, it's a placeholder. You have an idea of what you want there. You know it's not quite right. And I do the same thing where I'll go back and sort of read through the pages to sort of get the feel of it, you know? And then so when I get back to that placeholder where I've put down and it wasn't quite right, I imagine, and I have done this a few times, that when you get to that point, you can sort of nail it, you know? Like you're in the scene, you're with the characters, you're building sort of the action and the suspense, and then you can really sort of like land it. But again, like it's built in layers, so you can always go back.
That's the important thing about writing, I think, is to keep remembering that it is built in layers. It is a process. You don't have to do everything at every stage. Indeed, it's impossible to do everything at every stage. I think that's the benefit of being a writer with more books under your belt. I think it's not that you find writing easier.
Oh, no.
It's just that you're more familiar with the process. So when I did that first draft of that cartoonish scene in the dunes, I didn't go, oh my God, I'm a terrible writer. This is such an awful scene.
Yeah.
I'm gonna walk away from the whole thing. I thought, no, do you know what? This is part of the natural process.
Yeah.
It's getting it down initially, and then it's going back and layering it in and just holding your faith in that process.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably very intimidating when you first thought of the scene, but you knew you needed it and you had to sort of walk yourself through it. And then now here you are able to talk about it. You know?
Hindsight's a wonderful thing. Do you feel the stress of the moment as well when you're writing a scene of great conflict and you're kind of in it? Are you feeling it? Are you kind of feeling those punches or reacting to it?
Specifically when I'm writing, I kind of see the scene as it acts out in my head. And then I just try to, and sometimes you overwrite it, which is just part of the process. And you have to rein it in a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea, and I think the best writing comes when you are so engaged and with your character and the conflict they're involved in, that it sort of forces you almost to make these, incredible choices and leap the giant cliff or whatever, fall into the river and swim for your life, whatever you're doing. I somehow have lots of characters that fall off cliffs and swim in rivers. So that was my go-to knife fight in the dunes. Yeah.
Do you have personal experience of these crises?
Of course, yes. I live quite the life of conflict.
When I'm writing, I really react kind of very physically to it as well. So if anyone had a camera on me when I'm writing, it would be ridiculous because my face is pulling all kinds of expressions. And I do think that ultimately you need to feel what you're writing as a reader as well. It's like if I write a scene that I hope is moving, if it doesn't move me in the writing, if I don't tear up at the end of my novels, they're not working yet. They need something more. Maybe that's just super self-indulgent, but it's how I roll.
I think a lot of us probably act things out, We're probably not the best actors, but we do act things out sort of in the safety of our, writing rooms. So,
So should we go from then falling off cliffs and getting thrown into rivers to micro conflicts?
Sure. Yeah.
Micro conflicts, I think, should be our fifth point for people to remember, because potentially overlooked when you're dreaming up that grand, exciting novel idea, but actually having micro conflicts stitched through the pages of your story can really hold the reader.
The idea behind a suspense novel or a thriller is that you're leading the reader to all these tiny little moments of conflict that are actually, and some can be very major moments of conflict. And you sort of lead them right to the edge of the cliff and don't push them off, So they are sort of minor conflicts, and there can be all kinds, like conflicts related to relationships, conflicts, it's like we were talking about, like character versus nature, character versus character, character versus self. Self is a big one for me because it's sort of self-doubt and the things that sort of pile up against your character as they walk through this world,
I think that's incredibly relatable for a lot of people as well. I think that's what really draws people in on a very basic and human level. I mean, I'm thinking of the Q&A that we had with the brilliant author Tess Gerritsen, and she had a fantastic example of how she uses micro conflicts to good effect. And she said, it's not about car chases and gunfights, knife fight in the dunes. Hello. She gave an example of a moment from her own life where she felt something like this in a story actually has readers pretty hooked. And she was about to go out for an evening. I think it was to a book launch or something. And her mum, she's grown adult at this point, and her mum said, "Oh, you're not wearing that skirt, are you? It's a bit short." And she just walked out of the house with her mum's words ringing in her ears, thinking, "Oh God, is it a bit short? How annoying is that of my mum to even mention it?" And it stayed with her all through the evening. And I think as readers, you're going, well, how will she respond to this? Will she go in and change? Will she roll up the waistband like I used to do at school, make it even shorter? Or would she, call up her mum and it be the straw that breaks the camel's back and tells her everything that she's always wanted to say, tipped over by that one, "Oh, that skirt's a little bit short" moment. And I think, those kinds of very minor incidents, ripples, little tensions in novels are kind of what keep us engaged because they're so relatable for our own lives.
Yeah, I mean, usually when you're writing a novel, you sort of introduce an idea early on within a scene or the larger novel, and then that idea sort of festers and it becomes, I mean, at least for me, it becomes a little bit like rotten and nagging at the character and hopefully in the reader's mind as they remember things. And you usually sort of like leave little breadcrumbs along the way so that these little tiny conflicts, these little like, stabs of the knife, work their way through the novel and then are eventually addressed, in some way. Or if they're not addressed, become sort of these outward conflicts or threats that, we as the reader might see coming, but the character doesn't see coming at all.
Yeah, poor characters. We put them through it, don't we? We really do. So we have our big overarching conflict for the story, but then making sure that throughout we have these minor ones as well. Which, hey, it'd be nice if life was like that, wouldn't it? Just one big conflict to address.
I don't know. It sounds very stressful.
Well, I've loved talking about conflict with you, Eb. It's actually been very relaxing and not at all sort of, stressful.
We didn't get into any fights. No knife fights, no fist fights. Yeah,
maybe we're disappointing the audience by not actually bringing the conflict into action. But hopefully that's given people some food for thought when they're talking about writing.
I think there was some really nice tips shared here today, and just for things to remember when you're, putting your novel together, because it does, it happens in all these little tiny spaces, little bits of suspense along the way, little scenes, tiny conflicts.
Go forth and make trouble. Give us characters that we can really care about, right? So we can feel their pain as readers. And I think that's probably a winning formula.
Thank you for joining us today. We're so pleased to have you along for the writing journey, and we hope to see you on another episode of The Novelry on Writing. If you'd like to learn more, visit us at thenovelry.com. From first draft to finished manuscript, at The Novelry you'll enjoy one-to-one coaching from best-selling authors, live writing classes with award-winning authors and literary agents, and you'll work with a publishing editor all the way for submission to literary agents toward a publishing deal. All writers learn from other writers, even the greats. Write your novel in good company. Join us at The Novelry. We'll show you how to start, coax your story into shape, cheer you on to type the end.